A good Monday morning to you, Central Georgia. Hope your week's getting off to a good start. Obviously, the weather that we're having so far as you've made your way out the door to work, to school, to graduations, to anything you may be doing to kick off the work week, it has been messy and it has been gloomy. So really just picking up that forecast that we had all weekend long and continuing it into the beginning of the work week. So that's where we're going to break down what the specific impacts you're going to see today are going to be in your extended forecast. And we're going to talk about what's in store for the rest of the week. The system will finally get out of here. And then we are going to look at those rain chances to steadily decrease. And we're actually going to look at a pretty big warm up, the biggest warm up we've seen so far. Well, I guess not biggest warm up in terms of how many degrees, but we are looking at the warmest temperatures of the year to settle in as we head into your weekend. So let's go ahead and start out with our 5-day rainfall totals. So now that we did get this event started, probably last Wednesday morning is when we finally started getting some of that on again and off again rain. And now we have continued that pattern all throughout the weekend into the beginning of this week. So here's a look at where some rainfall totals do stand all across central Georgia. Most areas are going to fall in kind of these yellow and orange shades, maybe even some green shades. So that's going to be anywhere from about the inch mark all the way up to 4 inches in some areas. Sandersville over here in this green shaded area, about 1.5 inches of rain, about almost 3.5 inches of rain up in Baldwin County and Milledgeville. Downtown Macon up here has gotten about 2.5 inches. Warner Robins just over 2 inches, closer to 3 inches in Taylor County and Butler. And if you're in this lone spot really close to the Wilkinson-Twiggs County line right there, it's going to be a little bit of a shade of a blue. And you've only gotten about 1/10 of an inch of rain in the past 5 days. So kind of funny how some areas can really just get left out all of these rainfall totals. But I do want to turn your attention to some of the darker colors that we're seeing. So obviously the scale up here, you can get into the reds and even the pinks. Well, we do have a couple spots of those in central Georgia. One of those being Dooley County and even some portions of Crisp County just to the northeast of Lake Blackshear, stretching up into the southern tip of Macon County up there around Montezuma. We do see some totals that are even upwards to 6, 7, 8, or 9 inches of rain over the last 5 days. And most of this did come in the form of a severe thunderstorm warning that did track through Dooley County all the way up into portions of southern Houston, over into portions of Pulaski County, eventually up into Bleckley County. And not only that, we did see another severe thunderstorm warning, maybe about 30 to 45 minutes later, follow in the same footsteps. So that's why you're seeing these shades of pink. And that's going to indicate the heavy rainfall that's going to be within these strong and severe thunderstorm warnings. And that's what passed through this kind of western half of Dooley County, northwest Crisp, and then all the way across I-75 into southern Houston and even some portions of Pulaski and Bleckley counties. But not just those areas. We did see some totals that were very high as well. Some of these pink shaded areas along our south and southeastern corner, areas like Mount Vernon right there on the Montgomery and Wheeler County line, close to 7 inches, almost 8 inches of rain down just southeast of Alamo and Wheeler County. Some spots around 4 inches in Soperton, about 4.5 inches in Vidalia, and then over to the east of Cadwell, you can see that line of red that goes all the way through Lawrence County. That's about 6.5 inches over there. So these are very substantial rainfall amounts to get over the course of 5 days. That's a lot of rain to receive in a little bit of time. But thankfully, we weren't dealing with these colors. Once you start to get into the grays and the blacks and the whites. How about just south of I-16 as you move out of central Georgia, just south of Metter, where that's going to be the label right there? 16.3 inches of rain over the last 5 days. And they're not alone. You continue to go farther down to the south of this kind of gray and white blob. 15.3 inches of rain around Reedsville. You can see almost 11 inches of rain. So once again, thankful that we don't have that or any of those rainfall totals here in central Georgia, but just showing you how close that a lot of that rain was to creeping into some of our areas here. And we can kind of see how close it was and which areas were really impacted the most in terms of this rainfall. But actually, I want to take it to this graphic and I'm going to zoom it all the way out, because it wasn't just the state of Georgia, obviously right here, going into southeast Georgia, into portions of southern South Carolina. That's probably where the bulk of the rain fell. That's where we continue to have heavy shower after heavy shower traverse over the same area. But this system has crowded a lot of rain over almost the entire Gulf Coast. You can see some areas closer over to the Gulf Coast of Texas into Louisiana, not as much or as high of rainfall totals. Once you get into states like Mississippi, Alabama, and especially here in Georgia and Florida, those are where the rainfall totals have continued to rise over the last couple of days. Lots and lots of rain that has been dumped on the south and the southeastern portion of the United States. So up here in Macon, we got about 2.4 inches of rain. I think that's what it said on that last reading, but that is where I clicked downtown Macon. We take our observations at Middle Georgia Regional Airport in the far southern tip of Bibb County. So after a lot of rain and a good amount of rain, when I was last showing this graphic, I believe it was last Friday, we were actually still hovering about 2.5 inches below average for this time of year. Well, after this weekend's full of rain, we've seen this grow up to about only a ½ inch below average. So all this rain has really done a very, very good job at putting us back closer to average for where we should be this time of year in terms of rainfall. And it has resulted in a green box above the month of May. We're about 1 inch above where we should be at this point in May in terms of rainfall, with still more to come today, even possibly Tuesday and Wednesday, maybe even another rain chance as soon as this weekend. So as you see right here, this is as of May 11th, as of yesterday. Whatever we continue to add on to these totals will get added once I update this graphic tomorrow, but we won't get those total values updated until we get the Almanac data, which is going to be sometime later this evening around 4 or 5 o'clock. So that is good, and the rain can always be a good thing, but obviously you don't want too much at one time, especially being given how kind of dry we are. We really haven't received much in the way of rain as of recently. But yesterday's Almanac is quite a story to tell. So 62 was the morning low temperature. That was lower than our temperatures that we did have this morning. But 68 degrees was the high temperature. A 6-degree spread between that morning low and that afternoon high temperature, showing you the influence that dense cloud cover and a whole lot of rain throughout the entire day can have an influence on that temperature. So we saw a little bit of a warm up, but still that is the coolest high temperature we have seen here as of many recent weeks, probably since we go back into sometime in February or January in central Georgia. So it was nowhere near our average high of 85 for this time of year. Our morning low was a couple degrees above average of 58 this time of year. 98 for a record back in 1916. We fell 30 degrees shy of that. So that is definitely a good thing. However, you see that 9 in front of that number. Keep that in mind as we head to the end of your 7-day forecast. The 90s may not be too far away whatsoever. So we recorded just over 1.5 inches of rain at Middle Georgia Regional Airport yesterday, and that actually puts us about 0.13 inches above average for this time of year. So now looking at these values, I believe we got some kind of an update throughout the morning. I updated that rainfall graphic when I came in, so it looks like they've added on some more rainfall totals that maybe fell overnight. So this actually puts us above average for where we should be this time of year in terms of rainfall. So that is a very good thing. We were trying to get back closer to that 0.00 mark. So we're about 1/10 of an inch above it now. I'll have to go back and update that 2025 rainfall graphic, and there's still going to be a little bit of rain to come throughout today, throughout tomorrow, throughout Wednesday. Hopefully that can continue to provide us with a little bit of a cushion and get this number maybe even about 1 inch above average by the time it's all said and done. So now let's go into your headlines. The rainy stretch does roll on, at least for today, but it does become more scattered as we go into tomorrow and Wednesday. And then the last headline, a complete flip of the script in terms of your forecast. Going to get a lot more sunshine as conditions continue to clear, and that may lead to the first time in the 90s for the year of 2025, and most certainly is not going to be the last as we head into the middle of May, and June, July, and August do wait upon us. So here we'll go to the quad view of the sky cam. So you can see some light showers falling in downtown Dublin. If you look at some of the darker areas on the sky cam image, you can see some of those water droplets falling from the sky. Looks like just cloudy skies up here in Warner Robins in the top right. Once again, some patches of some dark bottoms of clouds at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. And another pretty gloomy image here in downtown Macon. Haven't seen much variation in these skycam views all morning long, besides the fact that we were dark early this morning and now we have some light in the sky. And you may have some rain at times. However, at sometimes you may just have these gloomy skies that are going to continue to leave puddles on the ground because we're not getting that sunshine. We're not getting that evaporation of any of the standing water that still lingers. Temperature-wise, most everyone is above the 70-degree mark now. It looks like Monticello is the only one hanging out in the upper 60s. Everyone else 70, 71, 72. A few outliers in there, 74, 75, 76 from Butler, Montezuma, all the way down to Unadilla. And then it does look like Americus is also somewhere in the mid-70s, but still warming up accordingly, even despite the cloud cover that we currently have. We're getting some occasional breaks in that cloud cover in spots where it's not as dense as it was yesterday, so that's what's going to contribute to lead to this warm-up throughout the rest of the day. 75 in Panama City, 73 in Jacksonville, and 74 in Orlando all go above the 72-degree mark we have present here. But areas in Texas actually finally a little bit cooler than we are for a change. 68 in Dallas, 67 in Houston, 61 in San Angelo, and then 71 down in Laredo in the southern tip of Texas, which has been popping up some 80s at this current time whenever we do this extended forecast. Actually, Washington, D.C. matching the temperature that we have currently in the picture. So dew points, we have the return of this dark green color, so this muggy air that you can wear. The dew points haven't really changed much throughout the course of the morning. It has been a noticeable humidity with dew point temperatures in the upper 60s that have been flirting with the 70-degree mark, but we're continuing to see this dark green color push all over central Georgia, and this is when you start to get enough moisture in the atmosphere to start to create what we call pop-up showers and pop-up thunderstorms. However, that doesn't really look to be the case today. We actually have some form of an interactive weather system that actually will drive a little bit of organization with this. However, not going to be one of those big surface fronts. It is going to be something higher up in the atmosphere, more in the mid-levels and the upper levels of the atmosphere, but it will do enough to create some ample lift as we go into this afternoon. It has been a bit of a breezy morning. I think the winds have actually gone down a touch from early this morning. When I was walking into work, it was quite breezy outside, and we still see some of those winds gusting up to 13 miles per hour, like up here in Milledgeville, steady breeze of 8 to 9 miles per hour in areas like Macon and Warner Robins over into Butler as well. So a lot of blue and a lot of yellow shades on this winds and wind gust map. And these winds can get a little bit gustier if you are to encounter maybe a storm or two later on this afternoon. So what are we going to do temperature-wise for the rest of the day? Looks like we'll crawl all the way into the upper 70s by about 1, 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you're going to see temperatures kind of stop their increase, somewhere in the upper 70s by 4 and 5 o'clock. This is going to be if we receive some of the rain that is in store for later on this afternoon. We are looking to get some breaks in the cloud cover that will continue to contribute to the warm up. So at the very high end of the scale, which we haven't really been hitting as of recently, without any rain, without any cloud cover, we could see a couple areas pop up some 80s on the board later on this afternoon, but not seeing really any indications of that as of right now. Satellite and radar picture continues to show a lot of cloud cover the farther east that you live, and kind of just these lines, these straight up and down lines that have been forming all morning long, whether it's a light shower or it's some pockets of heavier and steadier rain, still very scattered in nature, but going from areas like Jasper County up here in our northernmost counties, even a bit of a thunderstorm up there with a lot of lightning that's clumping together. That's going to obviously indicate some heavier rainfall rates. It could even indicate some small hail if this is to pop up a severe tag or not. But as we go into the eastern or northeastern corner of central Georgia, areas like Eatonton, just to the west of Milledgeville, southeast Jones County, over into the tip of Wilkinson County and Johnson County, and areas around Sandersville, up into Hancock County, other areas of Baldwin County. Some sprinkles down north of Eastman and northern Dodge County, over along the Wrightsville area. Plenty of rain to be found in the form of some steady showers, even some thunderstorms up here like we see up in Jasper County. And I'm actually going to zoom it in on that real quick because this is pretty new. This kind of popped up out of nowhere. So you can see these shaded areas of even some dark red within this just to the west of Shadydale, north of Monticello. Doesn't quite look like it does meet severe criteria, but it is saying something that now we are starting to get warmer, and now we have moisture in the forecast. Well, we've had moisture all morning, but now we have more moisture in the forecast. It's going to create a breeding ground for anything that wants to pop up later on this afternoon, because that's obviously two of the big ingredients that you do need for some stronger weather. You need warm temperatures to contribute to surface heating. That's going to make the atmosphere more unstable, and also a lot of moisture at the surface that continues to rise up The only thing we really need is something that's going to cause it to lift. We need some sort of lifting mechanism, and that's what looks to be on its way here fairly shortly. So let's click over to the next radar image, take a look at the entire state of Georgia as a whole. Plenty of rain to be found far and wide, mainly to the north and northeast of us as of right now, but lots of lighter showers off the Atlantic coast. And then this over here is what I want to turn your attention to, kind of to the east and southeast of Montgomery. This is going to be what we call a short wave. So this is going to be a small scale feature that maybe only stretches a state or two. And essentially it is a frontal boundary, but it's going to be higher up in the atmosphere. That's why it's not going to necessarily usher in some cooler and drier air. It's not going to have as strong features as a surface front would, but it is going to have a little bit of a lifting mechanism. So that's why we're looking at some organization of this rain right there, moving in from eastern Alabama, southeastern Alabama, and it's going to continue kind of its northeasterly path all the way up into central Georgia eventually. And what's in front of it? A whole bunch of clearing right here where we're getting some ample sunshine, some of that surface heating. So we're really kind of priming the environment for this short wave that's going to move through in the next couple of hours. Taking a look at your surface map, and it is just a whole cluster like it has been as of the past week or so. Everything that we're seeing weather-wise is courtesy of this low pressure center, and it's definitely moved up to the north a little bit. It's probably going to find itself more so in western Tennessee. We have this stationary boundary that's leading the way into a cold front just to the north of us. That has been kind of acting as a blocking mechanism from allowing this low pressure center to finally move up towards the north. Well, what we kind of refer to this as a cutoff low. So it does sound a little fancy and whatnot, but a low pressure center is always going to be associated with a lot of moisture circulating around it. And typically areas of lower pressure is where we start to see our more active weather, whether that's in the form of showers or thunderstorms or even anything in the way of severe weather. When we get into hurricane season, we'll start talking about the centers of these tropical systems, how low their pressure is, because the lower the pressure goes, the more intense the storm does get. So all of this is courtesy of the big circular L that you see in red right here, and it has some fronts draping down to the south and maybe over to the east of it. What I want to tell you about this is these systems are normally centered farther up to the north of us. Occasionally we can see them form a little bit farther down to the south, but the jet stream normally acts as kind of a guide for these low pressure centers to move from west all the way over to east into portions of the country. So you'll see these systems normally move from left to right on these surface map features, normally to the north of us. This one kind of fell off the tracks though. Kind of think of the jet stream as an escalator or a conveyor belt that's going to guide these low pressure centers west to east across the country. Well, this low pressure system kind of just hopped off the escalator. So in turn, it's kind of just been sitting around the south and the southeast corner of the United States along the Gulf Coast. So we haven't seen much movement with this. It's going to take something to kick it back into gear to knock it back on the escalator and eventually move its way out to the north and the northeast. Haven't quite seen that yet, but we are seeing indications of this finally creeping up to the north, and that's going to be the theme over the next couple of days. This system will finally exit the picture, but not before it does bring another potential for some stronger weather later on this afternoon, and we still have the potential for some scattered showers and some lower end thunderstorms on Tuesday and Wednesday. So today, stop me if you've heard it before, on and off rain once again. Not going to be a complete washout everywhere in central Georgia from sunrise to sunset. That's kind of what happened yesterday, but the rain didn't really get going until later in the afternoon. A few strong storms are once again going to remain possible. And now once we get to the severe weather outlook, I'll explain more on that. When I want to talk about the winds, we'll see that steady breeze like we're seeing right now, 5 to 15 miles per hour. But if you are to see some stronger weather, a thunderstorm or two, that's when we can look at the wind gusts getting above 20 miles per hour, things getting a little bit messy in terms of the winds, but once you get to that 20, 30 mile per hour threshold, that's obviously your fair share of a gusty, windy day. But thankfully, we're not hopefully going to see any winds of the severe criteria, but those are going to be very localized if you do see those. Partly cloudy with some thunderstorms. That's the icon I chose for today because we're going to get some clearing out to the west that we're already seeing here in real time. So we'll get our fair share of sunshine. That's going to help contribute to a warm up to the low 80s. That's going to be in some areas. Now it's just going to depend on how quick that rain gets to you, how quick the cloud cover gets to you. But if you just have nice and partly cloudy skies into the warmer portions of this afternoon, That's as high as your temperature could get later on today. And that sunrise, it was really hard to see this morning with the cloudy skies and the rainy skies. It was at 6:38 earlier today. So let's go over to your flood watch. This was something I was showing throughout this morning because we've received a lot of rain over the last 5 days and we still have more to come. Well, the good news is the National Weather Service did allow for the flood watch for central Georgia counties to expire. In fact, all flood watches are expired right now in the entire state of Georgia. They still remain back over here to the west in Alabama, but it was for areas like Taylor, Macon, Dooley, Crisp, and Wilcox counties, and it was going to expire at 2 p.m. later today. However, the flood potential and the flood concern is really decreasing as we go throughout the day. So that is good news. They allowed it to expire a little bit earlier than the time it was set to as of right now. Taking a look at your aerial flood warnings, we always like to look at those river water levels as we do get periods of prolonged rain like this. And it is very good to see that the Oconee, the Okmulgee, and the Flint all aren't running any aerial flood warnings. So definitely running higher than usual because they receive their fair share of rain. But the only aerial flood warnings we do see are going to be down along Toombs County, going down the I-16 corridor, getting over to areas that are kind of where that shaded area I was referring to earlier with the grays and kind of the blacks and the whites that have gotten 10 plus inches of rain over the last 5 days. But the good news is the water there that is running very high is going to continue downstream. It's not going to go upstream into the Oconee, into any of our other rivers. So hopefully we can keep the aerial flood warnings out of the picture as well as the flood concern does continue to decrease. But just a reminder, if we are to receive a good amount of rain in some areas over a short period of time throughout today, we still can't throw out the risk of an isolated flash flood warning like we saw in Toombs County earlier this morning. So how to stay safe during this? Turn around and don't drown. We don't just say it because it does partially rhyme and it does make for a catchy phrase. We do actually mean that. If you run into some standing bodies of water, especially if they're covering the whole roadway, make sure you're not trying to drive through those. Avoid driving in low-lying areas, especially if they're near runoff water, if they're near some ponds, if they're near anything that is beginning to puddle up, or maybe it's at the bottom of a little bit of a hill. If you do become stuck in your vehicle, make sure that you do leave your vehicle. Your life is more valuable than material things. However, if you do follow the turnaround, don't drown rule, you don't have to worry about this whatsoever. So just be extra cautious because a lot of times these standing bodies of water can be a little bit deeper than they do appear. It's kind of like that sign that's on your rear view mirror. It's objects in the mirror are a little bit closer than they appear. Same premise kind of goes for standing bodies of water during some floods. Now on to the storm potential. This is probably the third or fourth day that central Georgia has found themselves in a level 1 out of 5 risk for some strong to severe weather. The potential threats still remain the same as most days that we did see this past weekend. This just means that you have the chance of seeing a thunderstorm or two that can pack a punch with gusty and damaging winds and even some small hail. But obviously once you get hail above that 1 inch in diameter mark, that's when you start to get to severe level hail. That may classify more as some medium-sized hail. Nonetheless, you do have the risk of hail if you are to see that heaviest pocket of rain run over your area. The possibility of a brief tornado is there, just like it was yesterday, just like it was the day before. That's something we're going to keep an eye on throughout this afternoon. The risk is relatively low, but it is non-zero, so that does still remain that it can be a possibility. And we've seen plenty of tornado warnings, even confirmed tornadoes pop up in these level 1 risks. So don't go taking the level 1 for granted just because it's not a 2, it's not a 3, it's not a 4, what we've seen as of recent months. It is still a risk for severe weather. Everyone in central Georgia still has the possibility of seeing some severe weather throughout today. However, hopefully we can just keep this limited to severe thunderstorm warnings, and hopefully the severe thunderstorm warning, while it can have those gusty winds and some small hail, it will dump its fair share of rain on you. So if you were like that one area in eastern Twiggs County, only lucked out with about 1/10 or 2/10 of an inch of rain, that would do numbers for in terms of improving your rainfall totals over the course of the next couple of days. So we go into future view now and see what it has to say around 2 p.m. Remember, I was talking about that short wave that was back over into east and southeast Alabama. That's going to continue its path up into central Georgia. Should start to enter our west and our southwestern counties by about 2 p.m. this afternoon, maybe a little bit earlier. So just keep a close eye on the radar if you are planning on heading out the door or maybe leaving work a little bit earlier around this time. As it does push in, doesn't look like it holds its organization terribly much. we could see a completely different scenario. Future View hasn't done the best in terms of what the shape and kind of what the form of all this convection is going to do as it does traverse through central Georgia as of recent days. But this is 5 p.m. later on Monday. Still going to, at the very least, see scattered showers and storms, whether they're severe or not. But going into the nighttime hours, that's when we'll start to get a little bit cooler. That's when the short wave is going to move through. And then I think we're just going to be left with some scattered sprinkles, some scattered steady showers like what we're seeing currently on the satellite and radar. Hopefully we'll start out Tuesday nice and dry. We have these thin clouds over to the east. We can actually see the sunrise for the first day, and who knows how long. It just feels like it's been gloomy, and you've only gotten about 5 minutes of sunshine before, yes, the clouds and the rain do return. Going into your Tuesday afternoon, still scattered rain all in the vicinity of us. However, you're going to notice this shift in the winds kind of coming in from the south and the southwest now. That's going to mean that this low pressure center is going up to the north of us. So around these low pressure centers, you have counterclockwise spin, so going backwards around the clock like my hand is moving. Once you get into the bottom half of that low pressure center, you can see that the winds are going to continue to come in from the south and the southwest. And then as we go up into central Georgia, they're starting to turn, kind of go up the about 4, 3, 2, 1 o'clock side of the clock. And then on the northern side of that low pressure center, that's where you're going to see the winds kind of moving from east to west. But it still looks like rain is mainly of the scattered variety going into tomorrow afternoon. Still not ruling out the potential for at least seeing a thunderstorm, but we're not outlined in any severe weather risk for Tuesday or for Wednesday as it does currently stand. This could very well change as we go into tomorrow, but that's where things do stand right now. I think rain is going to be a lot more scattered, so more areas will remain dry as opposed to the last couple of days, and a couple areas could hear a rumble of thunder or two. And Future View continues to think that we'll see maybe a good cluster of some showers, maybe even some steadier and heavier rain flow through during the overnight hours into early Wednesday morning. Don't think anything's going to be of the severe nature because it's going to be a cooler portion of the day. And then we get into Wednesday morning. Rain could still linger in some areas, maybe another wave of rain trying to move through during the 3 to 4, 5 o'clock hour on Wednesday. Most of it looks to be to the north of us. And then we finally clear out. Yes, I told you and I promised you that we would finally get some clearing as we go into the overnight hours into early Thursday morning. That's when we're looking at mostly dry conditions to finally settle in, at least for a day. Then we get to the weekend and everything's kind of up in the air again, but we'll get there in just 1 second. Humidity day by day, not going to see much fluctuation with this. Maybe a slight downtick for Tuesday and Wednesday, which would be good. Any decrease in humidity that we can get, that's going to allow for a little less moisture to work with as these systems kind of roll by, and maybe you have another short wave or two like we were talking about that can produce some lift. Well, they're not going to have as much moisture to lift up into the atmosphere, hopefully limit things in terms of thunderstorm activity. But our dew points are basically going to hang out somewhere in the humid range all week long. We see a downtick from Saturday into Sunday, and I'll show you why that is on the long range models in 1 second. But first, how much more rain do we have to go? That's probably the question that you're wondering, other than when will conditions finally clear out? Well, if we go according to our Future View model run, not too much, maybe about a ½ inch more, an inch, maybe 2 inches at the very most. You see 1.8 inches up there in Sparta is what's forecasted right now. So the good news is the substantial rainfall totals that we've seen, not going to add too much more to that. However, local areas are going to get maybe about 1 inch or 2 inches of rain, depending on which areas do see kind of the heavy showers, the heavy thunderstorms, the heavy rain associated with that train over the same area over and over again. Now let's go into the long range models. I did promise you clearing for Thursday. I've gone without any rain chances for the end of your midweek. But then we go into Friday. That's when things get a little bit fuzzy. It looks like something's trying to form up to the north and the northwest of us, some sort of frontal boundary, and seeing good agreement that there will be something try to form. However, the organization of it going into Friday evening, not looking very organized whatsoever, but it does look like I think it'll hold off at least for Friday evening. Going into early Saturday morning, we see a good amount of agreement amongst the GFS and the Euro that there is good organization, there's a good coverage of rain just to our north, and it looks like it's going to fast track down into the state of Georgia. Well, we go through Saturday afternoon. Maybe the features just aren't there as we go into your Saturday evening plans. I would love it if Saturday would stay nice and dry as well, but it does look like maybe it kind of hangs around as we go into the end of your weekend. I think it's probably going to pass through from what we just saw on the muggy meter, because if this front does pass through, what's to follow behind a cold front? Cooler and drier air. So that would make sense in terms of what the muggy meter was saying with that downtick in the humidity from Saturday into Sunday. But it does look like we still have some scattered rain chances, or the potential for them, as we head into the weekend, maybe even into the beginning of next week. We'll fine tune the details after we get out of this first dreary stretch, then turn our focus to what the details for your weekend forecasts are going to be. Your afternoon highs. Low 80s maybe today and tomorrow. It's all going to depend on if you get rain, how much cloud cover you do have. But as we go into the midweek and eventually the weekend, mid 80s, upper 80s, 91. Yes, I finally went with throwing a 90 on the 7-day forecast. So that's what I think is in store for your Friday. That would be the first time eclipsing the 90-degree mark so far in 2025. And obviously, the big story will be getting back above average. I mean, a high temperature of 68 yesterday. Yes, we've been well below average. Plenty of days that have topped out in the upper 70s, maybe the lower half of the 80s that have been below our average high this time of year. So we finally will see that temperature increase, which we're pretty used to seeing in the month of May. It was only a matter of time. Just be thankful Mother Nature waited about 2 weeks to at least pop a 90 up there on our forecast. How about your morning lows? Not much change in those. They're just going to fluctuate somewhere in the 60s, so still trending above average. And some days that we can have rain in the forecast, we can have some cloud cover in the forecast for the mornings. You'll see more so some mid 60s, maybe even upper 60s like I have forecasted for Friday morning. These values are definitely going to fluctuate, but all you need to know is it's going to have a pleasant feel, but the humidity is going to be noticeable each and every morning. We're getting into that time period where the humidity and the dew point temperatures are going to virtually match those morning lows about each and every morning. It's going to be about a 90 to 100% humidity forecast each and every day. So here's your 7-day forecast right now. Today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, all having the chance for seeing a scattered thunderstorm. I think today is going to have a little more organization to it, and today has more potential for possibly a severe thunderstorm that can pack a punch, gusty winds, some small hail. Going to continue to monitor that brief tornado risk as we go into the afternoon hours, but then conditions steadily look to improve as we head throughout the midweek. Rain chances starting to go down a little bit, temperatures starting to rise up, indicating more clearing in the cloud cover. And yes, that's what's in store for your weekend right now. Really hard to try to nail down at least what days it's going to rain this weekend. I went with a 10% on Friday, but now the long range models aren't showing much of anything. You get to a 20 and a 20 on Saturday and Sunday. It's all going to depend on how that front holds together as it moves through central Georgia. And the temperatures are going to be a pretty good indication. Right now with upper 80s around the 90-degree mark all weekend long, I do think that we're going to have pretty good clearing, at least in whatever is to form cloud cover or rain. So it does look like our temperatures are going to warm up like they normally would. Maybe rain's not necessarily in the forecast, and that would not be a bad thing whatsoever. I would love a nice and dry weekend, even if it does mean that it's going to be, I think we can finally say hot once we get into the 90s. It might be a hot weekend, but if we can get a nice partly cloudy weekend, maybe a nice breeze in the forecast, a nice weekend this weekend would definitely make up for the dreary Mother's Day weekend that we just got out of. But once again, keep the rain gear handy for today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And then also keep a close eye on the radar as you're making your way home from work, way home from school, anything that you're going out and about to do. Make sure you're taking a look at the skies. Number one, use your eyes as your observation tool. You see dark clouds off in the distance, starts to get a little bit breezier. May not be the time that you want to go outside. You may just want to wait until that shower or thunderstorm does roll over you. Or nonetheless, go on your handy dandy phone, go up to the 13WMAZ website. We have our live radar on loop. You obviously have all the radar apps at your disposal, whatever you want to download in that. And if anything is to pop up severe warning wise, we'll be on the stream for severe thunderstorm warnings. And if there's anything in the form of a tornado warned storm, then we'll cut into the air and you'll be the first to hear it from us on the weather team. So thank you for tuning in to this week's today's extended forecast. I covered everything for the week. I probably talked enough for the entire week, but we'll be back here again at 10:30 tomorrow for another update on what's ahead for your Tuesday and Wednesday. Hopefully can fine tune that weekend forecast a little bit better as well. Thanks for joining in. Have a magnificent Monday.